The BFG by Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl has a reputation, meaning he is known for writing very descriptively. And sometimes there's so many descriptions or so many hard ways he wrote a word that it can be difficult to understand. Let's see if we can follow along in Roald Dahl's The. We'll get better at it. The BFG. And today's chapter is titled The BFG. Yeah. So I think this is where, if I look ahead at the pictures, this is where the giant meets Sophia. Sophie. This is where the giant meets Sophie. Can you see the picture? Huh. They're talking. The giant and Sophie. We're talking. All right. So, oh, you can't see. So sorry. There it is. The giant picked up the trembling Sophie with one hand and carried her across the cave and put her on the table. Now he really is going to eat me, she thought. The giant sat down and stared hard at Sophie. He had truly enormous ears. Each one was as big as the wheel of a truck. Picture it. Picture it. And he seemed to be able to move them inward and outward from his head as he wished. Maybe like I would think an elf would. Like this. I is hungry, the giant boomed. He grinned, showing his massive square teeth. The teeth were very white, very square, and they sat in his mouth like huge slices of white bread. So picture the teeth all in a row, as big as bread. Puh. Please don't eat me, Sophie stammered. The giant let out a bellow of laughter. Just because I is a giant, you think I is a man-gobbling cannibal? You are about right. Giants is all cannibal-y and murderful. And they does gobble up human being. We is in giant country now. Giant is everywhere around. Out there us is famous. The bone crunching giant. I wouldn't want to hear the bones crunching. Bone crunching giant crunches up two wopsies whiffing human beings for supper every night. Noise is ear busting. Noise is crunching bones. Noise crackety crack for miles around. Ow! Sophie said. Bone crunching giant only gobbles human beings from Turkey. The giant said, every night bone crunching is galloping off to Turkey to gobble Turks. So Turkey is a country. It is all the way across the ocean.
And town.
But probably in the area of where Sophie is from. Sophie's sense of patriotism was suddenly so bruised by this remark that she became quite angry. Why Turks? She blurted out. What's wrong with English? Oh, so she's from England. And she is suddenly insulted because the bone-crunching giant eats the children from Turkey, not from England. Suddenly she is upset. She shouldn't be upset. She should be relieved. Be relieved, Sophie. Bone-crunching giant says Turks is tasting oh so ever much juicier and scrumdiddlyicious. Crunchier, says Turkish human being, has a glamourly flavor. He says Turks from Turkey is tasting of turkey. I suppose they would, said Sophie. Of course they would, the giant shouted. Every human being is diddly different. Some is deliciously scrumptious, and some is uckshish. Greeks is full of ukshilush. No giant is eating Greeks ever. Why not? Asked Sophie. Greeks from Greece is all tasting greasy, the giant said. I imagine that's possible too, said Sophie. She was wondering with a bit of tremble what all this talking about eating people was leading up to. Whatever happened, she simply must play along with this particular giant and smile at his jokes. But were they jokes? Perhaps the great brute was just working up an appetite by talking about food. As I am saying, the giant went on, all human beings is different from flavors. Human beings from Panama is very tasting of strong hats. Why hats? You is not very clever, said the giant, moving his great ears in and out. I thought all human beings is full of brains, but your head is emptier than a bungadoodle. Do you like vegetables? Sophie asked, hoping to steer his conversation towards a less dangerous kind of food. You is trying to change the subject, you is, the giant said sternly. Why is having an interesting babblement about the taste of human being? The human being is not a vegetable. Oh, but the bean is a vegetable, Sophie said. Not the human bean, the giant said. The human being has 2 legs and a vegetable has no legs at all. Sophie didn't argue anymore. The last thing she wanted to do was make the giant cross. Cross means mad. Cross means mad. So you know what a human is, right? And you know what a human being is, right? Yeah, we are human beings. But the giant calls them human beans. Like the vegetable beans. But they're not beans, well, are they? The human bean, the giant went on, is coming in dillions of different flavors. For instance, human beans from Wales is like a whooshie of fish. There is something very fishy about Wales. Wales is a place, W-A-L-E-S. Not W-H-A-L-E-S, the mammal that swims in the ocean and breathes oxygen. You mean whales, Sophie said? Whales is something quite different. Whales is whales, the giant said. Don't gobble funk around the words. I will now give you another example. Human beings from Jersey is the most disgusting, woolly tickle on the tongue, the giant said. Human beings from Jersey is tasting like cardigans. Cardigans are sweaters. Jerseys are shirts.
I have a jersey. The LeBron jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, like a sports jersey. Jersey is also a kind of material. You mean jerseys? Said Sophia. You are once again gobble-funking, the giant shouted. Don't do it. This is serious and snitching subject. May I continue? Please do, said Sophie. Danes from Denmark is tasting ever so doggish, the giant went on. Of course, the taste of Great Danes. Wrong, cried the giant, slapping his thigh. From Denmark is tasting of dogs because of the Labradors. Then what do the people of Labrador taste of? Sophie asked. Danes, the giant cried triumphantly. Great Danes. Aren't you getting a bit mixed up? Asked Sophie. I is a very mixed up giant, the giant said, but I does do my best, and I is not nearly as mixed up as the other giants. I know one who gallops all the way to Wellington for his supper. Wellington? Where is Wellington? Asked Sophie. Your head is so full of squashed flies, the giant said. Wellington is in New Zealand. The human beings in Wellington has a especially scrumdiddlyicious taste. So says the welly-eaten giant. What do the people of Wellington taste of? Sophie asked. Boots. Boots? Of course, said Sophie. I should have known. Sophie decided that this conversation had now gone on long enough. If she was going to be eaten, she'd rather get it over and done with right away than be kept hanging around for any more. What sort of human beings do you eat? She asked, trembling. Me? Shouted the giant, his mighty voice making the glass jars rattle on the shelves. Me gobbling up human beings? This I never. The others, yes. All the others is gobbling them up every night, but not me. I is a freaky giant. I is a nice and jumbly giant. I is the only nice and jumbly giant in the giant country. I is the... Wait for it. Wait for it. Big. Oh, it's frozen. Big, friendly, giant. I is the BFG. What is your name? My name is Sophie, Sophie said, hardly daring to believe the good news she had just heard. But if you are so nice and friendly, said Sophie, then why did you snatch me up from my bed and run away with me? Because you saw me, the big friendly giant answered. And if anybody is ever seeing a giant, he or she must be taken away. Hip switch. Why? I think this is just the land of the giants. We haven't gotten to it yet. Why? Well, first of all, said the BFG, human beings is not really believing in giants, is they? Human beings is not thinking we exist, do they? I do, said Sophie. But that is only because you has seen me. I cannot possibly allow anyone, even little girls, be seeing me and staying at home. The first thing you would be doing, you would be scuttling around, yodeling the news that you actually seeing a giant, and then a great giant hunt, a mighty giant look-see would be starting up all over the world with the human beings all rummaging for the great giant you saw and getting wildly excited. Wow. People would be coming rushing and blushing and bushing after me with goodness knows what. And they would be catching me and locking me into a cage to be stared at. They would be putting me into the zoo or the bunkum house with all those squiggling hippo dumplings and crocodile willies. This guy doesn't really talk right. He mixes up things and he has poor grammar. But that's okay, we still like him. Well, as long as he's friendly. Sophie knew that what the giant said was true. If any person reported actually having seen a giant haunting the streets of a town at night, there would most certainly be a terrific hullabaloo across the world. I will bet you, the BFG went on, that you would have been splashing the news all over the wonky world, wouldn't you? if I hadn't wiggled you away. I suppose I would, Sophie said. And that would never do, said the BFG. So what will happen to me now? Sophie asked. If you do go back, you will be telling the world, said the BFG, most likely on the telly bumpkin box and the radio squeaker. What is the telly bumpkin box? What is the telly bumpkin box? And the radio squeaker? Avery?
I think the TV and the radio.
Television and the radio, yes. So you will just have to be staying here with me for the rest of your life. Oh no, cried Sophie. Oh yes, cried the BFG. But I am warning you, not go ever whiffling about one of these caves without I is with you, or you will be coming an ucky-mucky end. And I is showing you now who is going to eat you up, if they is ever catching even one tiny glimpse of you. So these are the giants, and they eat people. And if they had a glimpse of her, they would be all going crazy, just like she had a glimpse of him. She would have a chance to tell them about it. The big friendly giant picked Sophie off the table and carried her to the cave entrance. He rolled the huge stone to one side and said, "Peep out over there, little girl, and tell me what you is seeing." Sophie, sitting on the BFG's hand, peeped out of the cave. The sun was up now and shining fiery hot over the great yellow wasteland with its blue rocks and dead trees. "Is you seeing them?" the BFG asked. Sophie, squinting through the glare of the sun, saw several tremendously tall figures moving about the rocks. About 500 yards away, 3 or 4 others were sitting quite motionless on the rocks themselves. Dun, dun, dun. We will end right there. We are in the middle of a chapter, but I think we can think about what will happen to Sophie. What will happen to her if she is not allowed to go back to the human world and she is stuck in the giant world where she has to fear for her life? What will happen to Sophia? I'm writing that down so I remember to ask you guys. What will happen to Sophia? What do you guys think? Will she stay there forever, or will she talk him into letting her go back home?
Letting her go back.
What do you think, Avery?
So what? So talk him to go home, but they're gonna make a plan to go talk to the queen to help them get rid of the giants.
So they're going to have to make a plan. She's going to go back home. They're going to make a plan. Anybody have something? Oh, you think the same thing? Anybody else have something different? Let's just come up with something different. A lot of people agree with Avery. What is another thing that could possibly happen? Even if you agree with that he's going to let her go home, but they're going to have to make a plan. What could be something crazy? Henry.
She tries to run away.
Oh, she tries to run away. Yeah. Oh my gosh, she would be so crazy, but she's tiny. She could do it. She could do it. She's tiny enough.
She could be like,
She could hide from those big old goobly goops. Yes.
yeah.
All right, we'll see.